Hello, how are you? Hope you're well. I'm Shivana Kankunda, here to discuss about armed conflict today. And my discussion today is going to be about conflict and armed conflict. And I'm going to first talk about the introduction of armed conflict. And in introduction, I'm going to discuss about conflict. I discuss about the types of conflict. I then later go to armed conflict. Then I go to consequences of armed conflict. And as I begin right now, I'm going to talk about conflict. And I stated a definition of conflict as a disagreement or clash between individuals, groups, or nations arising from difference in interests, beliefs, values, or goals. Conflict can manifest in various forms ranging from interpersonal disputes to large-scale armed confrontation. They occur in personal relationships, workplaces, communities, and even at international levels. Maybe there can go to the types of conflicts. And the first type of conflict is interpersonal conflict. The conflicts are very many, but I'm going to do briefly. I explain about like 5 types of conflicts. And the first one is interpersonal conflict. This type of conflict occurs between an individual or small group of people due to differences in personalities, values, or goals. It can arise in personal relationships, workplaces, or social settings. And here I can give an example of 2 friends disagreeing about how to spend their free time. Maybe I talk about me when I want to go out with my friend, and we are disagreeing on the place where we can go and we have our time together. So this is a conflict that is between me and another person, but it is always a small group of people. And another type of conflict is interpersonal conflict. Intrapersonal conflict. The first one is interpersonal conflict. The second is intrapersonal conflict. And interpersonal conflict refers to internal struggle within an individual, often involving conflicting desires, beliefs, or emotions. An example of a person may experience inner conflicts when making a difficult decision or when facing moral dilemmas. Here I can talk about maybe when I pursue my career. Maybe I have a career path that I have. Maybe I give an example, I'm a sociologist. And when I get a job, I get a job in finance. And maybe I'm there conflicting with myself about my career path. I say maybe I don't want to work with finance, I want to be a sociologist. That is the conflict. That is intrapersonal conflict. Intrapersonal conflict is always basically in the person themselves. The person is conflicting with him or herself. And another conflict I can talk about, the third one, is intergroup conflict. Intergroup conflict occurs between different groups, such as social, ethnic group, or political groups. This type of conflict often arises from competition for resources, power, and territory, and can lead to prejudice, discrimination, and violence. An example I can give here about intergroup conflict, I can talk about maybe I come from a family, and the family I come from, they don't allow me to work in a bar. And maybe me as a person, that's the job I have at the moment. So maybe I'll be there in between. What will my family say if I decide to take up this job? What will my parents or my brothers or my siblings take of me if I do this job? So that conflict between me and maybe my family is called intergroup conflict. And the fourth one is intragroup conflict. Intragroup conflict occurs within a particular group of community and involves disagreements or tension among its members. This can arise from competition from leadership, conflicting interests, or diverse opinions on how to achieve group goals, tension between different ethnic communities in a multicultural neighborhood. An example of intragroup conflict, you can talk about maybe our political parties right now in Uganda. If you see in Uganda, there are some political parties that are always conflicting with the other political party. An example is NUP and NRM. You'll find NUP members really conflicting with the members of NRM. So that confliction of politics, of leadership, and conflicting interests, it is all based in intra-group conflict. And the last one I can talk about is organizational conflict. And this one occurs within a workplace organization, and it involves disputes between employees, departments, or management and staff. With this example, it is an example, I can give an example of when a department is conflicting with another department. Maybe I say financial department is conflicting with communication department. That's an example I can give. You find this department is conflicting with the other, but they're all in the same organization. And when we get done with that, maybe I can give a definition about armed conflict. And armed conflict refers to a situation where two or more organized armed groups, such as military forces or rebels, engage in warfare or violent confrontation. In armed conflicts, the parties involved use guns, use weapons, and military tactics to achieve their objective. When we talk about armed conflict, we find where different parties are conflicting with the other, but they are using weapons, they are using guns, they are using, maybe I give pangas, or they are military tactics to achieve their own objectives. When I leave that, I talk about consequences of armed conflict. And the first consequence is loss of lives. We see that armed conflicts results in the loss of lives amongst civilians, soldiers, and combats. When we see every conflict that happens and is armed, people will lose lives. And not only civilians, but also soldiers. We can talk about, maybe I can give an example. We remember about ADFs that attacked a school in Kasese. They really killed people. They really killed those young children, which brought the loss of lives. And when people lose lives, the family members will remain in grief, and they will suffer with their losses. And another point I can talk about is displacement and refugees. Armed conflicts forces millions of people to flee from their homes, either to escape violence or due to the destruction of their communities. Here I can give an example of Somalis. We've seen people from Somalia come from Somalia to come to Uganda to look for refugee, to look for where to stay, to look for where to be, because in their home areas there is always war. And when people come like that, they'll always be displaced, because they will leave their cultures, they always practice there, they will leave their family members, they will leave their businesses and come to Uganda, where they are put in refugee camps. They have to associate with new people from different places. So that is also another consequence of armed conflict. And another one I can talk about is humanitarian crisis. Conflict zones face severe shortages of essential resources such as food, water, shelter, and medical supplies. Civilians, especially vulnerable groups like children, the elderly, and the sick, suffer immensely from malnutrition due to this. Here I can talk about when we go to a camp like Nachivari. You'll find Nachivari is congested with people from different areas. Some come from DRC, some come from Congo, some come from Sudan, some come from Somalia. When all these people come and they are congested, trust me, they will not have all the best services they need. You'll find women cannot acquire better health services because there are not enough hospitals. People are many more than even the services that are given to people. So women will be at their homes, they will not access enough hospitals, maybe to work on their reproductive health, maybe to give them other health services like giving birth, like treating them, and children, and even elderly. And another example I can talk about is economic devastation. Armed conflicts disrupt economies by destroying infrastructures, disrupting trade, and crippling industries. I can pose a question on this. Can there be a conflict in a community and people go to work? No, people cannot really go to work. Since there are conflicts and there is war, there are armed conflicts, people always stay indoors. And in those people, there are people who are always doing businesses. There are some that are even going to offices. So people will find it hard to go and work. So this will bring to economic devastation. And another example I can give is psychological trauma. Witnessing or expressing violence, loss, and displacement can lead to severe psychological trauma for individuals and communities. We see some people who have grown up in wars. Maybe we give an example of people who have been in wars and conflicts since their childhood. You find them traumatized. Even small things can make them get angry. You find people are always annoyed all the time because they are traumatized of things they saw when they were growing old. Because you cannot find, someone cannot kill your parents when you're seeing, and tomorrow you find like you're very okay. So people always have that trauma. They'll have that stress within themselves that will bring them to be always depressed. And another one is destruction of infrastructures. Infrastructures such as roads, bridges, hospitals, schools, and power plants are often targeted on armed conflicts. We've seen in many armed conflicts, many people always target schools, target hospitals, target roads and better buildings. So when people come and destroy them in armed conflicts, there will be total loss in the community. Because even when women want to go and get better health services, there are no roads for them to go to the hospital. If people want to do trade, there are no roads for them to transport their goods. So really, that's really bad. And another one I can talk about is environmental damage. Armed conflicts can lead to significant environmental damage, including deforestation, pollution, and destruction of wild habitats. Here I can give an example of explosives and chemical weapons. When during armed conflicts, when the release of chemical weapons and explosives, there will always be air pollution. Another one I can talk about, spread of diseases. Spread of diseases, when people come and are congested in refugee in displaced in the displacement areas, you find people congested, and when they're congested, there is easily spread of diseases. Maybe diseases like cholera. I can talk about diseases like airborne diseases. People always find it easily to contract diseases from the other since they are congested and in one place. Maybe I talk about trafficking and exploitation. When we see in conflicts, most of the times people are trafficked, and all the time when there's trafficking, it's all about women and children. They are trafficked and taken to other countries to work as slaves for cheap labor, which is not allowed. And another thing I can talk about is legacy of hatred and resentment. People, when there is a war and it ends, even after that, people always find resentment, and there's always hatred. I can give an example of conflict like the conflict that happened in Rwanda about Hutu and Tutsi. Even up to now, you find a Hutu hating on a Tutsi because they think they killed their people, and you find like even the Hutu hating the Tutsi, even the Tutsi hating the Hutu, because of what happened in a genocide that happened many years ago. And what I can conclude in conclusion, armed conflicts inflict profound and manifest consequences that revert across individuals. And as I conclude, I looked at maybe the points that we can use, or the areas we can focus so that we can stop the armed conflicts. And I address the root causes of conflicts, promoting dialogues and reconciliation. Maybe when there is reconciliation and dialogues, armed conflicts can stop. And also investing in sustainable peace building efforts are essential steps towards mitigating the human suffering and devastation brought by armed conflicts. And also by fostering cooperation, understanding, and empathy, we can work together towards a world where conflicts are resolved through peaceful means, and where every individual can live in dignity, security, and peace. Thank you for listening.